The first story. At the beginning of 10th grade, I was new to the school and very curious to explore all the nooks and crannies on campus. After school that afternoon, it was only 5:30 p.m., still early, so I convinced some of my classmates, both boys and girls, to stay back and explore the school with me. Since our school had a lot of students, we waited for 30 minutes until everyone dispersed, and then we set off to explore the campus. Walking through the corridors from the first floor to the third floor, there was nothing besides classrooms, so I suggested we go back. I thought I was the most adventurous one, but little did I know they were even more eager than me. They asked to stay and play a little longer before heading home. It was already around 6:30 p.m., getting quite dark, and I wanted to go back to freshen up and relax, but they were so enthusiastic that I decided to go along with them. After all, I was alone anyway. Then Kay led us to the back of the school, where there was nothing but trees. As we turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of a woman standing by a tree, far away, with disheveled hair, staring in our direction. Out of natural reflex, I said, "Who's there? Who's over there?" When I called out, the figure disappeared. I told my friends, and they said I must have imagined it or had a vision. I thought the same and didn't pay much attention, turning away. It was already 7 p.m., and we decided to head back. As we reached the parking area, we heard music coming from the school's music room. My friend PA said, "Hey, guys, do you hear that?" "Oh, yeah. It sounds like music, doesn't it? But is there anyone still at school? Let's go back and check." I found it strange and looked at the parking area, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 17? 17 cars for 17 people. So, who was there? We called them back. "Come on, let's go home. It's getting late. Look, all the cars are here. If there was someone, where's their car? You're overthinking it. How could someone walk to school? Come on, let's go up and see." I didn't say anything and followed them. But there was still a lingering question in my mind: who comes to school to play music at this hour? As we reached the music room, the lights were on, but there was no one inside, yet the sound of the piano continued. My friend T said, "Oh, maybe someone forgot to turn off the lights after school. Let's turn them off and go home." "But what if someone came here but went to the restroom?" His remark piqued our curiosity, so we all went to the restroom area to check. As we peeked into the women's restroom, we saw a woman with long hair, covered in blood, crawling on the floor. We were stunned and speechless. When the woman stood up and tried to grab us, we quickly pulled away because her face was extremely terrifying. We put our heads down and ran. While running, I wondered why this person's figure seemed so familiar. Suddenly, I realized it was the same person I saw by the tree. I didn't have time to think much and just kept running. When we reached the parking area, all the lights in the schoolyard were turned off, and the atmosphere was eerily quiet. Then, M said to me, "Hey, you're usually so brave. Why are you holding onto my neck so tightly? I can hear your heartbeat." I was petrified and replied, "Really? I'm still here." I turned abruptly, slowly looking back, only to see that woman clutching M's shoulder and saying, "You guys, stay here. Play with me." We panicked, quickly got in our cars, and drove out of the school, while that woman stood at the gate, staring at us with glowing red eyes. The next morning, some of us went to school as usual, but M was probably in shock and didn't return to school until 2 days later. The second story. The story takes place when my cousin, who is a 10th grade student at Marie Curie School, encountered something strange. Their parents came to me for help, asking me to assist them. They mentioned that their child had been attending extra classes and often had to stay late at school to improve their academic performance. One day, when they returned home, they were frightened and told their parents that they had encountered a ghost at school. A few days later, they fell ill and were unable to attend school. The incident occurred one evening after their extra classes had finished at around 7 p.m. They were sitting in their study room in Block C. I am not allowed to disclose the room number or floor as it is their personal information. While packing up their belongings to leave, they heard sobbing sounds from the adjacent classroom. At that moment, they knew that everyone else had already left the neighboring classroom, which made them feel scared. As they walked past the adjacent room, they noticed that the lights were still on. Thinking that there might not be a ghost if the lights were on, they cautiously looked into the room and saw a girl sitting at the desk, crying. They later told their parents that they didn't understand why, but they suddenly felt sorry for the girl and leaned their head against the classroom door, asking if she was alright. The girl looked up at them, and they noticed that she was also beautiful. However, she shook her head, extended her arm, and gestured for them to come inside. As they took a few steps into the room, the lights suddenly went off, and the girl's body emitted a blue light. She gave them a creepy smile, revealing blood-stained teeth, and stared at them. The most significant detail was that the girl only had half a body, with the other half covered in blood. At that moment, they were terrified and screamed, "There's a ghost." They ran out of the room and down the stairs, but they tripped and fell. Despite the fall, they managed to get up and run out into the schoolyard, screaming loudly. The security guard noticed the commotion, ran over to them, and escorted them while calling their parents. After a few days, they developed a high fever and couldn't attend school. I visited their house to check on their condition. Suspecting that the child may have been possessed by a demon, I brought the necessary tools and equipment to assist them. When I entered their room, I saw their mother sitting near their bed, taking care of them. I introduced myself and said, "I'm Uncle K. Can you tell me what happened?" They trembled and stammered, "I encountered a ghost, Uncle. Every night, I dreamt of myself sitting and crying in the classroom. There was a teacher I had never seen before standing in front of me. She kept hitting me and accusing me of being lazy, not studying hard enough, and falling behind in class." They continued to recount that in their dream, their classmates were also present, and all of them had hostile gazes, as if they wanted to attack them. They cried intensely in their dreams to an indescribable extent, and when they woke up, they noticed long red marks on their hands, right where the teacher had hit them in their dream. It was an incredibly eerie story. I used my ability to see spirits and my psychic powers to examine the wound on their hand, discovering that it was caused by ghostly energy. I performed 2 incantations, recited a spirit-binding spell, and asked their mother to hold them tightly. I lit 2 candles and turned off all the lights in their room, focusing on the direction where their shadow was reflected on the wall. Then, I saw a dark figure standing there, even though my cousin remained still without moving. The dark figure on the wall continued to shift and move. I took 2 prepared eggs and threw them at the dark figure. It appeared to be in pain and stopped moving. It seemed like the dark figure merged into my cousin. About 5 minutes later, they lost consciousness, and their mother held them in her arms, terrified. I tapped their forehead, and their consciousness entered the realm of spiritual void within the dream. I told their mother, "Your child has been led astray by an evil spirit in their dream. Soon, you should enter their dream and save them. If they don't wake up within 30 minutes, take this soul-summoning bell and ring it. The sound will guide them back." After saying that, I sat beneath their bed, tied a red thread blessed by a senior monk to their index finger, and tied the other end to my own finger. I recited a spiritual invocation and then chewed on a piece of colorless, immediately falling asleep. When I entered the dream realm, I saw a familiar school classroom in a schoolyard as if I were reliving my own student days. Without much thought, I ran to find my cousin. I ran straight to Block C, and although all the classrooms were occupied by students, every one of them had a vacant, empty expression, engrossed in their studies without noticing anything else around them. I shouted, "L, where are you? Uncle K is here, speak up." Immediately, I heard a weak voice saying, "Uncle, Uncle, I'm here." I followed the voice, which gradually grew fainter, but luckily, I found the little one in a classroom at the end of Block C. They were being carried by some students from the same class, who were preparing to throw them downstairs. I quickly chanted, "Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Amahili babathuba. Mkoluadam, dwang koluat dwang. Ma quimau yen win he." Suddenly, the students carrying them transformed into a group of demonic spirits, their faces covered in blood flowing from their deep eye sockets. They all looked at me with wide open mouths, screaming in horror, and then abruptly threw the child down the stairs. I rushed to stop them, but it was too late. The only thing I could do was recite the incantation and use my sealing technique to make the spirits disappear. Running back was futile. I thought the child had fallen to their death in the schoolyard. If they died in the dream due to the influence of the evil spirits, they would go insane upon waking up. I turned around and ran downstairs, but to my surprise, another female student was holding onto L, as if she was protecting my little cousin. I said, "Thank you for saving L." She nodded and smiled, but suddenly her lower body disappeared, and blood flowed out from where her lower body used to be. Remaining calm, I realized that this was the ghost my cousin had encountered during their extra classes. I asked, "Why did you die?" She replied, "I studied too much, and as I crossed the road, I was reading a review book and didn't pay attention. In the end, a car ran over me, crushing half of my body. This ghost didn't have any malicious intent. She just wanted to meet my cousin and help them avoid the evil spirits here because by helping others, she could increase her chances of transcending." I wasn't afraid, and I didn't want to comment much on this pitiful ghost. It seemed that nowadays parents push their children to study too much to keep track of some achievements, which causes them to lose the innocence and joy of being a student and leads to regrettable incidents or accidents. I told the ghost, "Rest assured, I am a Thai sorcerer. I will save Elle. When they wake up, I will come to the school and perform a ritual to help them transcend." The ghost smiled and disappeared. I gently shook Elle and said, "Elle, wake up, everything is fine now." The child slowly woke up, and I held their hand, guiding them out of this eerie dream. But strangely, the more we walked, the more ghosts appeared. The dream world felt so real, sending shivers down my spine. Many people with bandages were carrying injured individuals back and forth to the medical room. As they passed by, the people on the stretchers would pretend to be dead and then suddenly stick out their tongues and laugh at my two little cousins. Elle, my cousin, cried and whimpered, "Uncle, I'm so scared, take me home." The more they cried, the more ghosts appeared, including the teacher who used to hit them. These ghosts chased after us. Realizing that there were too many of them, I grabbed my cousin's hand and ran. The more we ran, the more they chased us. Suddenly, a black cat appeared, puffed up its body, and let out a loud cry, "Meow! Meow! Meow!" Instantly, the ghosts chasing us panicked and disappeared. At that moment, I heard the sound of my cousin's mother ringing the summoning bell. In my subconscious, I found the way out, right to the flagpole in the schoolyard. I held the little child's hand and walked towards the flagpole. I recited an incantation and performed a ritual. After that, everything became blurry, and as I was about to regain consciousness, I saw a faint figure that looked just like me waving goodbye. When I woke up, I saw the child being embraced by its mother, its complexion brightened without the previous darkness. It complained to its mother about being hungry. The mother joyfully rushed to the kitchen to find something for the child to eat. When there was no one around, the child told me that the black cat in the dream was its own pet cat. Recently, the cat had been sick, so the child took it to its grandmother's place for care. Interestingly, only the black cat could sense when its owner was in danger and would come to rescue, whether in dreams or in real life. The next day, I asked an old friend who happened to be a teacher at the school to accompany me to the school at 7 p.m. to perform a spiritual ritual for the soul of the little girl who had been hit by a car. The ritual aimed to eliminate the lingering resentment within the school. I hope that parents will consider their children and not burden them with excessive academic pressure, as it can take away the innocent and carefree nature of their school days. The third story. The school has been around for a long time, so it has a gloomy and old-fashioned atmosphere. Next to the school is a temple where incense smoke is always billowing. Sometimes when we run to the playground or during physical education, the smoke from the incense fills our eyes. Our school has two playgrounds, one spacious playground underground and a smaller one on the upper floor. From the upper floor, you can see the small altars in the adjacent temple. When I first started school in first grade, we studied in the underground classrooms. Our school has 2 floors and a rooftop. During break time, we usually go to the library on the second floor, where the librarians would play cartoons for us to watch. I heard my friends talk about it, so I was excited to go up there. Little did I know, something unlucky happened and I ended up going all the way up to the room on the rooftop. The adults imagined that the room would be as small as a guard room with a door leading to the rooftop. When I looked up, I saw that the room was pitch dark, and the furniture was covered in dust right next to the door. As I was halfway up the stairs, resting place, I felt a chill down my spine. It was playtime, and you know how noisy it can get when elementary school students play, but at that moment, everything was eerily silent. I was genuinely scared of ghosts when I was little, so I quickly turned back. But somehow, my feet couldn't lift off the ground, and it felt like I was being pulled towards that room. At that moment, my eyes were somewhat accustomed to the darkness, and when I looked closely, I saw a boy around my age and a girl who seemed to be 15 or 16 years old. The boy was lying on a table, holding a floating ball in his hand, while the girl sat next to him, swinging her legs while wearing a hat that fluttered in the wind. The scariest part was that the boy's body was lying face down, but his head was tilted back, like it had been twisted backward. As for the girl, her eyes were completely dark black. At that moment, the girl clenched her teeth, revealing her white fangs, and smiled at me while lifting the hat up. I was extremely frightened then, my teeth chattered, my legs trembled, and I wanted to run but couldn't. Luckily, I still remembered some phrases from my mom's teachings that I could recite when necessary. My mom followed a secret sect, and she explained that those phrases were the names of the guardian deities in the heavenly realms, and reciting their names would provide assistance. like reciting Amitabha Buddha or Namo Kuan Yin Bodhisattva. I couldn't open my mouth to recite, so I kept reciting them silently in my head. When I started reciting the first and second deities' names, there were a total of 5 deities representing the 5 heavenly realms. The girl jumped off the table and slowly walked towards me. I continued reciting until the 3rd and 4th deities, but then she stopped walking and started floating instead. When her deep black eyes were close to me, that's when I recited the name of the last deity. Just as she opened her mouth, blood flowing out, suddenly I was jerked backward, almost falling. When I turned back, I saw the teacher with a pale face looking at me. The teacher said that while passing by, he saw my shadow standing on the stairs looking up at the room on the rooftop. But that area was off limits, so he called me to come down. I don't know why, but no matter how many times he called, I didn't respond, so the teacher went up to get me. When he reached out to grab my shoulder, his hand felt ice cold, and he became even more frightened when he saw me turning back with eyes as dark as the girl I had seen. At that moment, instinctively, the teacher pulled his hand back, but somehow, I was pulled along with him. Just as that happened, the teacher felt a sudden numbness in his hand, then it gradually warmed up. My face also returned to normal, and that was when I regained consciousness. After that, the teacher took me to the office, poured me a cup of hot tea to calm my nerves, and began telling me about the room on the rooftop in the school. The story goes like this: during the liberation period, the current location of our school was a military hospital for war casualties. Next to it was a mass grave where unfortunate individuals who died in the hospital were buried. In the past, there were countless corpses and deceased soldiers. After the peace was restored, the bodies were removed and buried elsewhere, and the hospital was demolished to be rebuilt as a school. Due to the heavy negative energy in the mass grave area, a temple was built there, and offerings were made to appease and resolve any lingering spirits. Although there is now a shrine to appease the spirits, strange incidents occasionally occur near our school, especially on the rooftop, such as the occasional appearance of dead cats and dogs. Then one day. On that day, the rooftop was still accessible and students could go up there to play after school. However, it would be locked again in the evening after all the students had gone home. That evening, the school opened for a regular Mandarin class. In the evening, there were no regular classes, so Mandarin classes were held. A family came together to attend the class, consisting of a father and 2 children, a teenage girl around 15 to 16 years old, and a younger boy who was in 2nd grade. Usually, the class for young children would finish earlier, and the 2 children would play around in the courtyard while waiting for their father to finish and go home together. For some reason, on that day, the younger boy suddenly ran up the stairs towards the rooftop. The sister noticed and chased after him, afraid that he might fall. When she caught up, the boy had already reached the stairs and, before disappearing, he turned his head back towards his sister with a mischievous smile. She quickly climbed up, but when she reached the spot, she couldn't find him anywhere in the dark room on the rooftop. When she arrived, she was surprised to find that the door leading to the rooftop was wide open. The young boy was sitting precariously on the B40 railing, which was about 2 meters high, surrounding the rooftop. He was sitting with his back facing her, but his head was twisted backward, holding a floating ball in his hand. He swung his legs and looked at her with a strange smile. At this point, the sister was extremely frightened, but because she cared for her brother, she still ran towards him, intending to pull him down. Just as she was running closer, her brother suddenly jumped down from the rooftop, and blood splattered all over the ground. The spot where he was sitting left behind a hat. When everyone went out to see, the little boy was already dead, and his sister was sitting silently next to his body. The sister held a fan-shaped hat and placed it on her brother's lifeless body, then laughed maniacally without responding to anyone's inquiries. Someone saw this and invited the monk from the nearby temple for help. The monk brought a tray of seeds and a small black bronze statue of Namhai Buddha. As soon as the monk arrived, the little boy sat up, about to flee. But the monk managed to throw the tray of seeds around his neck. Just as the tray was put on, the boy fell down, his eyes blackened, and his mouth filled with bloody saliva. Upon seeing this, the monk placed the statue of Namhai Buddha on the boy's chest and then went up to sit on top of his head, holding his right hand against the boy's forehead, and began reciting a mantra. After a while of reciting the mantra, black blood started flowing from the boy's eye sockets, wetting the monk's hands entirely. Once the black blood had drained completely, the final drops turned into fresh red blood, shooting out like rays. Upon witnessing this, the monk yelled several times and slapped the boy's forehead forcefully. He made a crazy sound and then fell unconscious, lying still like a kitten, with his breathing returning to normal. The monk sat down on the ground, his face pale and looking several years older. After regaining his senses, the monk explained to everyone. The truth was that the temple was built on a haunted cemetery and burial ground of Namhai Buddha, where only the restless souls buried there could be suppressed. On the other hand, the school area still harbored heavy negative energy accumulated from the suffering and hatred of the war veterans. The accumulated negative energy gradually formed a massive, volatile mass waiting to erupt. The 2 children in this house were originally war veterans who died in this hospital and were reborn here. The younger one died prematurely and encountered the inauspicious day of the lunar calendar, so he was possessed by negative energy. When he died, he intended to take his sister with him, but fortunately, his sister had accumulated good karma and was saved by Ba Nam Hai. However, she still carried a portion of the negative energy with her. She and the restless spirit of her brother would haunt that rooftop forever. The spiritual power of the monk and Ba Nam Hai's statue could only contain them there to prevent them from harming others, but they couldn't be eradicated. Afterward, the monk performed a ritual and placed the statue of Namhai Buddha on the rooftop, instructing others not to disturb or enter that place anymore. The school also sealed it off, removing all the furniture and blocking the passage to prevent anyone from trespassing. From then on, nothing happened until the day I mistakenly climbed up to the rooftop. If it weren't for my mother's secret instructions, I wouldn't be sitting here typing this story for you guys anymore.